Okay. This question is from Miranda, is her name. She says, there is a serious threat to our current fresh water supply to erosion, irrigation practices, and pollution, which is causing acidity, salinity, and sediment buildup, as well as many other problems in rivers, lakes, and streams. These problems are affecting and reducing our natural clean water supplies. In addition, human interference with natural bodies is causing tremendous damage to numerous ecosystems. Is there a policy in the Venus Project design that can address these problems so that we can be sure to have sufficient fresh drinking water in the future without further damaging our natural ecosystems?
All the rain is collected by the canals. Can you hear me? All the rain is collected by canals. And areas where we've loused up the earth, where we've done strip mining, become storage basins for water. Now we can either use that as a natural lake, or we can put a bottom on it, artificial bottom. And I would say that we should harness the floodwaters rather than just become victims of damaged areas. There's a lot of floods and there's lots of rain. We have to collect it in funnels, and then the funnels have to be at a higher elevation so you have water pressure. The funnels would be on top of tanks, and they'd be shaped like a funnel. They'd be about 20 feet in diameter to 25 feet in diameter. The amount of funnels would depend on the size of the population. Do you understand that answer? Okay. And besides, I have no power now, and I cannot legislate anything. Yes, if I was in charge what I'd do, that's what I'd do. Harness the floodwaters, collect roof water, but I'd make the roof out of tile rather than tar paper or whatever it is. The tile is cleaner, and then your gutters would be stainless steel, and there'd be cisterns for storage of water. But I would do that in spite of the reservoirs and everything else. Redundantly care for people and their needs.
Okay, this one's from Kashif Shirazi in London. He says, I am by no means a man with deep pockets. I'm just a law student. However, I want to learn more about your product and your ideas and want to contribute to fast-forwarding the release of your film. If it is not confidential, would you be able to tell me how much you need to generate the release of this picture so that I know what I'm working towards?
Generate what?
He wants to know how much you need to release the picture.
Well,
this is a question that comes up a lot.
The problem there is if we collect several million, we can have actors in it and more animations. The amount of animations would depend on the donations we collect. I have no fixed amount, but the motion picture will be made with whatever we get. And the quality of the motion picture will be as good as we can make it, which isn't bad. We have pretty good facilities. But the actors may not be well known because we cannot afford to pay them. I can coach the children and all that sort of thing. And the children would be volunteers, you know. That's about all I can say is that sure, the more we get, the more elaborate the motion picture will be. I can't give you a figure now, but it's going to take several million to do a good movie so that it has the quality of sound and everything else that any other motion picture would have.
Okay. Same guy says, I have other questions to ask because I'm sure other people might ask me about it when I introduce your ideas to them. He says, one question, what do you say to people who claim the Quran provides scientific miracles and reveals things that no man in the time of its writings could have known? I know this is by no means your expert area, but I wanted to know if you have anything to say.
I really honestly cannot answer those questions. Now, people imply certain meaning just as they do with religious texts. They say, well, everything's been predicted in the Bible. There are generalities. There will always be war and rumors of war. That is not a prediction. That's based on probability. There's always been wars, and so all that a person does is say there'll always be wars and rumors of wars. It also says in the Bible, we shall always have the poor amongst us. We've always had the poor. We've never had a society that wiped out the slums. So I can say that's based upon probability without social change. It's like saying it'll always rain. And there'll be years, it says in the Bible, there'll be years of drought too. There have been that all along, so they're merely stating that there will be drought and there will be floods. There have always been floods and droughts. Rarely do they say orange trees will grow in Texas or orange trees will grow up north. They have no such predictions. And they never told us about the people flying into the Twin Towers. The psychics never warned us about it. And they never told us about the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor in advance. So I am very hesitant about giving absolute answers. I think we based our judgment on occurrences, things that happen, unless you control the weather. But that's another phase altogether. Do you understand my answer?
Yeah, that's good. And then the next one is, I want to ask Jacques Fresco about dreams. What does he think about dreams?
Well,
and he's reference. I think he's talking about with the meaning of dreams and or to see the future through dreams.
Yeah.
That.
Well, what I can say is if you eat a lot of food before you go to bed, stuffs your gut, you might dream that an elephant's sitting on your chest and it's hard to breathe. Dreams some are induced by physical conditions, toxins in the body, not enough sleep, sleep deprivation, or unfinished business. If you have a lot of stuff you want to do but you don't get around to it, you might be kept awake or you might dream a great deal. And sometimes dreams are completely automatic. They go from one associative system to the other and some of them have meaning. If you're sexually frustrated, your dreams might be managed due to your inhibitions, meaning a Catholic woman that has strong sexual desires would have to dream as though she were raped to be able to accept sexuality. And if she keeps dreaming those dreams, repetitive dreams, she might require that in real life to be held down. And even though she's married, her only sense of thrill might come through that method. And also, living in fear can induce certain dreams. Fear of starvation, fear of deprivation, fear of your husband leaving you. Sometimes it's based upon actual behavior, sometimes it's projected. When it's projected, it's called a mental disorder. But when it's based upon your husband not showing up till all hours of the night, and he says, I was out playing cards with the boys, he could have been out with a woman, so in that case it's not always projection. Emotional insecurity can produce negative dreams. And also you can elaborate upon your suspicions and make them so strong that you might kill the person even though they've done nothing. So I can't answer that question with absolute conviction.
In the frequently asked questions section, your responses to the consumption of animal protein was troubling. which says, we cannot outlaw what people eat, but we can outgrow the need for eating animal protein. As a strong proponent for the consumption of animal fats and proteins as the most efficient way of obtaining vitamins, minerals, and calories needed for human nutrition, I find it hard to grasp the idea that we could install the manufacturing of synthetic proteins, especially considering our direct connection to the Earth's resources in attempts to survive, nourish, and grow.
I agree with it until such time as we can.
Yeah.
But I think that in nanotechnology, eventually, we might be able to do that. But that remains to be seen.
Okay.
So at present, I would agree with that.
Okay, here's someone from Israel. He has several questions. First question is about, he says, control. When a person feels he is not in control and a situation is bad feelings subjectively intensified social psychology. For example, if a road accident will be outside the control of the person will feel worse than if the accident occurs under his control and he was responsible for it. How in the world, where the machines are responsible for everything being done, would a person feel in control and not controlled?
Well, when you get in an elevator, how often does it fail? When you get in public transportation, like trains and things, they don't fail that often. But if you're carried by a horse, it's slower and has other probabilities. And if you're walking, you can be hit by a vehicle or a horse, run away, you know what I mean? I can't really answer that unless he has a specific question. If machines operate well, if they have sufficient lubrication and there's no power failure, and if there is a power failure, if there's a redundant equipment that can operate on other types of fuel, I don't know. It depends on the complexity of the society you're living in. And it depends on the ability of the technicians of your society. But when machines do a great deal, if they do fail, they don't fail as often as people do. In other words, if an engine's fail on an airplane, you're in bad shape. But they seem to, in most instances, for the miles accomplished, they seem to be fairly safe. For the amount of people they move a certain distance. Now, if you say, what about the time when machines fail? That's why we would turn out engineers and problem solvers to try to diminish the possibility of failure. And that's what's happened over the years. In the old days, automobiles used to break down quite often. Today, you get many, many miles if you can afford it. If you can afford a decent car, they don't break down as often. And how often do your lights go out? They go out in hurricanes, tornadoes, windstorms, but not always. But eventually, when the nation can afford it through technological development, they'll be able to bury their wires underground so the transmission lines are not blown over or earthquakes do not topple them. And when each house has built-in generators and storage systems, when we put up buildings that I call self-sufficient structures or total enclosure systems, it means that there's hospital facilities, shopping, food preparation in the apartments of the future. You won't have to travel different places, but you can if you want to. It depends on the state of technology at the time. That I can't determine. We may even kill each other in nuclear war. I have no control of that, so don't ask me questions that I don't have any more control than you do over.
What about exceptions? What would happen if a murder occurs, out of envy or biological disease? Since there is no police, prison, or courts, who will catch the murderer Will they punish him? Can we help him? If so, who will? Will there be a special organization to deal with that?
During the transition, things will happen and people will be in prison or incarcerated. The transition is prior to establishing a resource-based economy. After the completion of a resource-based economy, the schools will raise children so they learn to appreciate different people of different color, and they will live together in peace. I don't imagine a person would want to hurt any other being that's extensional to them, unless there's a brain disorder. If there's a brain disorder, they'll be helped. And if it's an environmental disorder, say a strange environment in the future that we don't know anything about, a person comes from that environment and the behavior is erratic, I should say, I think we can help them. I don't see prisons, I see help. It's just like beating your car when it doesn't start. But if you know what to do, you can get your car to start. If you know who to call or what's wrong with it. The same with people. When you incarcerate them, you don't deal with the problem, you shut the problem up. Or you aggravate it.
Assuming there will be items that would be borrowed, like how the library works today, and will be items given for good, who decides on items to take to the first category and which to the second? Is clothing such as hats can be taken freely or for good? Does recording studio microphones permanently or on loan will be given to completion of use? Who decides?
Decides? That has to do with the educational institutions that are working on many students. So if there is a shortage, say, of cameras or TV sets or 3D dimensional displays, they go to schools first. The majority of people that have a need, those needs are met first. Do you understand that answer? Okay. That would be during the transition or scarcity of resources. And if there's scarcity of resources, that will be announced on every radio and every TV set that we have a scarcity, and it'll take 3 months to overcome that, barring other factors. But they will always level with you and tell you what the situation is. But they'll be working on it. You won't have to tell them, gee, work on this, or gee, I hope the government does something about that. The government, working with computers, will have their senses on everything and be able to manage those things that people need. We will use the polar regions to store surplus food as produced by all nations in stainless steel canisters, and we'll keep it buried in the south and north polar regions to be able to store food for indefinite periods of time. So in an emergency like an earthquake or Japan or China, we'll have access to the necessary materials. But we will come to those agreements and nations will join us. Those nations during the transition that do not join us do not have the advantages of joining. Do you understand that? If you don't want to join us, it's a cooperative venture between all the nations that join together. Those nations that wish to live independently will suffer. And in time, I feel most nations will join us because we do nothing to hurt anyone or exploit anyone.
Okay. This next guy has a pretty long letter about communism and Marxism and everything. You want me to read it to you?
Yeah, what does he want to know?
I'll try to compress it. He says in the beginning that he's an advocate of he calls it an anarcho-communist.
Yeah.
He interacted with some people on the internet who are Venus Project, and he feels it's a good, nice concept. And
does he want to know how it differs?
Well, no. Let me read it to you because it goes into a lot of things. He says, everything I was seeing was looking great, and I thought, I wonder what their views on communists are. So he went to the frequently asked questions. See, he says, I can't help but point out and stress the differences between Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, and communism. He says, the frequently asked questions state many things about communism, like that it used money, had elected officials, military force, police, banks, etc. I fear that there has been a confusion between the idea of communism itself and Marxism or Marxist-Leninism, which were intended to be methods for achieving communism.
I understand.
A communist society would be stateless, therefore without a highly centralized government or elected officials. A communist society would also be structured around free access to resources subject to consumption, which is a similar idea presented in one of the aims of the Venus Project. Communism also seeks to end wage slavery, therefore the need for money is done away with. A truly communist society could really be described as a resource-based economy. This greatly differs from what we have seen in USSR, Cuba, etc., which has been wrongly described as communism.
We agree.
Okay, what the USSR has adopted...
True Christianity is a brotherhood of man. We don't have that.
Right.
The way I understand it. So I would say that any communist system that was successful will be a threat to established systems, and they will try to prevent it from becoming successful, just as a protection for the established orders. We will interfere with communist countries, boycott them, make it difficult for them to get necessary materials, or drop toxic materials on their farms. We will try to prevent them from being successful. Any system that feels threatened by communism will do whatever they can to stop it. I am not threatened by communism, socialism, or anything else. We can work together. I think that the Venus Project is more updated than communism, and we use technology to advance people as fast as we can. We're not confused about the working classes having jobs. That would be an old idea where the workers go out on strike to get higher wages. They don't need the representation in the future because all people are cared for. So you don't need to give the workers any special. But communism has to arrive at that time in the future when you don't need unions, you don't need advocates of women's rights, because they're built into the system. But you can't do that until you can create abundance and have machines produce things fast enough so people can have housing rather than wait 150 years for the technology to evolve to that. In other words, I see that in the Venus Project we can move directly to mass housing, directly to feeding people. Those are the priorities. Feeding people first. So what we might do is develop extruded loaves that look like bread, but they're not bread. They contain all the vitamins. And if you put it in fluid, it expands and it can be eaten as a soup, can be consumed as a soup. But an emergency kind of food would have to be made and hermetically sealed, so you don't need refrigeration in canisters or whatever other methods come at the time. So we must develop a system and store it for food, water. Those are the necessities. That would be number one priority, feeding people during the transition and catering to their health needs as best we can.
He goes a little further on here. He's I think, in agreement with many things you're saying. He's just pointing out, he says that he feels Marxist-Leninism failed to apply Marxism effectively.
Well,
and that communism is...
In those days, don't forget, they didn't have the technology we have today.
Yeah.
So their options were limited by remote conditions, terrible weather, droughts. They couldn't handle the wide range of things that were necessary to handle in order to make a secure society. Unless you can, the more things you control, I'm talking about the weather conditions, the more things you control like that, mass production, agriculture, the safer the society, the more secure. And the more knowledge you have, the more secure. And if people just join the party as communist members and they don't study agriculture, preservation of land, reclamation of wastelands, if they don't study that, I can't see it going anywhere. I think communists would study those things, but that depends on the leadership, how much technical background they have to know what's important. I don't think people today know what priorities mean.
Let's see, I'll get to his question at the end, which says, he points out similarities between the Venus Project and Marxism. Says that both uses a transitionary steps, but where Marxism implements socialism in which the workers own the means of production, the Venus Project uses machines to replace the need of worker-operated means of production.
Right.
Both encourage open access to services like healthcare, etc.
Yes.
He says, I think what you should be trying to do is cooperate with Marxists who may find they share a lot in common with you, albeit you provide a slightly more stable solution.
They don't. So the Marxists would have to come to the Venus Project to say, what are your latest approaches and how does it compare with Marxism? And if they feel that the Venus Project is an advanced form, say, if they want to use the word communism, is the more advanced state of communism than that proposed many years ago when the options were limited. Does that answer your question?
Possibly.
Yes, if they ask us to join them, yes, but not a fascist group.
Okay.
We would help any group of people that would band together to take care of the earth and one another. We would support anything like that. We'd form a united front. You know what that means? Okay. With all people that have similar values, they may call themselves different names. Socialists, communists, Mankind United, any group that would work cooperatively towards sharing the Earth's resources, we would support. The best way to say that, we form a united front and share our best ideas with them and share their ideas with us, I hope. We'd also try to check out the most effective way of educating children. We try many different systems, and naturally those that work would dominate. The measure of success is how well the system works. We have no fixed notions, except that technology would be used to free people rather than enslave them. Machines would be subject to human need. Machines have no ambition. They don't want to control people or society. That's a human trait, brought up in scarcity, evolved through scarcity. And I think that the human traits of the future will be different because the environment they're brought up in is different. And the smarter people are, the broader they are in knowledge, the richer the society. Having nothing to do with words like democracy or socialism. It's the intelligent management of the resource, of all resources, for the benefit of all the world's people, regardless of race, color, or creed. I'm saying that so he doesn't have to ask that question. In the event of severe shortages, if there were a shortage of anything, eyeglasses or anything at all, the people that would be given eyeglasses are people that do more social service, if there were such a thing. Or else that you'd wear your eyeglasses, but during the night when you're asleep, someone else be given those things. a better use of resources, more intelligent management. But there'd be no such thing as an upper class unless you were head of the Department of Agriculture and you were in charge of increased food production. You'd be given eyeglasses or hearing aids. If your behavior were a priority form of behavior, not because you're a member of my club or my family. There are no elitists of any kind, technical or otherwise, unless there's a shortage or scarcity. You do that if a ship sinks, rather than women and children first, you ask people, anybody know how to navigate at sea? Get on the boat, one person. Does anybody know how to catch fish or birds at sea? Get on the boat, then women and children. I don't know what women and children first means. I don't know how just the future will be, but this is my concept of being just, if you want to use words like that, or concern about people. This is the best answers I have. If you have better ones, please submit it. I always ask other people, what are your alternatives? What do you offer? If they have no alternatives, then pose the question and see if I answer it sufficiently for you. Are the answers perfect? No, they're the best I know of up to now. When we have an open system, it's not rigid. I actually said on TV that communism is far better than the free enterprise system. No question about it. As corrupt or insufficient as it may be, it's far better than the free enterprise system. But a resource-based economy far exceeds the aims of the early Marxists.